Mexico has often been the setting for enigmatic, disturbing, and inexplicable events. So, get comfortable and turn off the lights, because these are 7 unsolved Mexican mysteries. Thank you so much for everything. We love you all very much. How are you? Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Let's begin. The Coyame Incident. On the night of the 25th of August 1974, U.S. military radar detected an unusual flying object in its airspace near Texas. At first, they thought it was a meteorite, as it was moving erratically. However, that object performed maneuvers impossible for a meteor. It deliberately changed course and entered Mexican territory. At the same time, a small Cessna-type airplane was taking off from El Paso, Texas, heading for Mexico City. Fate had it that both would meet in the night sky near the town of Coyame. According to unofficial reports and later testimonies, at some point over the desert, the unknown object collided with the airplane. The next morning, both Mexican and U.S. authorities were alerted that something had fallen on Chihuahua soil. On one hand, the U.S. radar had seen both the UFO and the plane disappear from their screens. On the other hand, locals in Coyame reported having heard a distant explosion and seen strange lights in the sky. The U.S. government immediately offered its collaboration to investigate the incident, but the Mexican government officially rejected the help, possibly due to sovereignty issues. An army team from Mexico was then sent to the impact area, while discreetly, U.S. military personnel from the Fort Bliss base in Texas organized their own recovery group, determined not to let whatever had fallen escape. What follows seems taken from a movie or a science fiction book, as it is said that the Mexican team arrived at the crash site in the middle of the desert first, and there they found the shattered remains of the Cessna. And not far away, something much more surprising. An object in the shape of a metallic disc, a few meters in diameter, a flying saucer half buried in the sand. This saucer showed dents and damage but was mostly intact. There was no report of visible occupants, at least not in the versions that have surfaced. The Mexican soldiers loaded both the plane's fragments and the mysterious disc into transport trucks, preparing to move everything from the site. Meanwhile, in the sky, U.S. planes closely monitored the operation, all without any authorization. According to documentation gathered years later by investigators like Noé Torres and Rubén Uriarte, authors of the book Roswell in Mexico, the situation took a terrifying turn when the U.S. recovery team finally entered the area. Upon arrival, they found the Mexican military vehicles stopped and all the soldiers dead in their seats, with no signs of external violence. The scene was simply chilling. The men lay lifeless, apparently struck down, and next to their convoys was the enigmatic saucer. Some theories suggest that the artifact could have released some toxic substance, radiation, or perhaps unknown biological agents that ended the Mexican team's lives in a matter of just a few seconds. Another possibility, simpler yet equally chilling, is that the Americans themselves were the ones who ended the Mexican soldiers' lives to steal the evidence and later invented the rest, although there is no clear evidence of this. The fact is that the Americans had a free path to act, and taking advantage of the absence of survivors who could offer resistance, the U.S. team proceeded to recover the UFO using biological protection suits. They secured the object, which is said to have emitted a metallic cold and a slight hum, and loaded it onto a military helicopter. Before leaving the area, they made a drastic decision. Using high-powered explosives, they destroyed all remaining evidence. They blew up the remains of the airplane, the Mexican vehicles, and even any fragment of the disc that might have been left on the ground. After these detonations, the desert went silent, as if nothing had happened. Only a few craters and charred pieces of metal would be found sometime later by ranchers in the area. The Coyame incident was never officially acknowledged by either government. For Mexico, the only thing recorded in those days was the crash of a smuggling airplane. In fact, it was known that a drug-running Cessna did crash in 1,974 inches that same area, which could have served to divert attention. For the United States, there was no comment, as is usual with these topics. However, the story began to leak among the local people. Over the years, Coyame became synonymous with the Mexican Roswell. The older inhabitants of the region say that they saw something pass by in the sky that night or that the army circled the town more than usual. Some even say that the spirits of the dead soldiers still wander the area or that they have seen strange lights subsequently, as if something were still guarding the crash site. The most skeptical argue that it could have been a simple, covered-up aeronautical accident. They suggest that the UFO story was built around the crash of a plane loaded with drugs and confusion on the radar. But for believers in this phenomenon, Coyame is one more piece of the extraterrestrial puzzle, evidence that ships from another world have visited us, and that governments would do anything to hide this from the population. And as long as no declassified official documents or direct testimonies from participants appear, which is unlikely, the Coyame incident will continue to fuel theories. And for now, it is very unlikely that we will ever know exactly what happened in the vast Chihuahua desert that night in 1974. The death of Octavio Ocaña. Octavio Ocaña, an actor known and very beloved for his role as Benito Rivers in the comedy series Vecinos, was only 22 years old when he lost his life, in quite confusing circumstances that still generate debate today. On the 29th of October 2021, Octavio was traveling in his truck on a highway in the state of Mexico with two other people when municipal police signaled for him to stop. For reasons that have not yet been clarified, a high-speed chase ensued that ended in a crash against a slope in the municipality of Cuautitlan Izcalli. Octavio was found lifeless inside his vehicle. But the cause of his death was not the accident itself, as he presented a gunshot wound to the head. Authorities quickly presented an official version of events. According to the local prosecutor's office, the young actor carried a firearm and, after crashing, he had accidentally shot himself with it, causing the fatal wound. A version that, of course, was heavily questioned by the media and public opinion. They also stated that toxicological tests indicated that Octavio had consumed alcohol and marijuana that day, implying that his condition could have contributed to this tragedy. Soon, inconsistencies began to circulate that fueled suspicions. Videos recorded by witnesses immediately after the crash showed police surrounding the actor's truck. In one of those recordings, an agent was observed taking something from the vehicle and hiding it, which many interpreted as planting or tampering with evidence. On the other hand, recordings also surfaced of the actor consuming illicit substances accompanied by friends, which polarized public opinion. The Ocaña family, deeply pained, rejected the version of the accidental shooting. Octavio's father publicly declared that he did not believe in that story and pointed directly at the officers involved in the chase as the possible people responsible for his son's death. To him and many others, there were indications that Octavio Ocaña could have been the victim of a covered-up homicide. Given the public pressure, the family managed to have an independent expert report carried out in early 2023. The results of this new forensic analysis were quite revealing. The criminalist hired found that there were no traces of gunpowder, lead, or other particles from the shot on Octavio's hands, which contradicts the idea that he fired the weapon. Furthermore, he determined that the caliber of the bullet that wounded him did not correspond to the pistol that the authorities claimed he was carrying. These findings suggested a quite different scenario. According to the independent expert report, Octavio Ocaña did not fire the weapon, and the bullet's trajectory would indicate that the shot came from outside the vehicle. It was even proposed that the young man could have been subdued, removed from the truck after the crash, and executed at point-blank range, receiving a gunshot to the head while he was defenseless on the ground. This chilling theory reinforced the demand for justice by the family. Soon, a legal process was initiated against the officers involved. The Ocaña family even received anonymous threats warning them not to continue with this media struggle or they would put their own lives in danger. Even so, by the end of 2022, one of the agents was detained and accused of his probable participation in Octavio's death, while another of the officers ended up fleeing and was a fugitive until being captured sometime later. Although this represented progress in the case, the judicial process is still ongoing, and the outlook remains uncertain. The true circumstances of Octavio Ocaña's death have become quite a mystery, one that has shocked both the entertainment industry and the general population. The House of Laments. In the city of Guanajuato, there is an old mansion that hides one of the most chilling true crime stories in the country. At the end of the 19th century, a series of disappearances began to attract the attention of the authorities and the population. Young men and women disappeared without a trace, and some people claimed to hear muffled screams coming from the mansion, which at that time belonged to a man named Tadeo Mejia, a wealthy and respected mining engineer who lived there alone after the death of his wife. The man was silent and hermetic, at least with his neighbors, which did nothing but raise suspicions around him. And finally, after several years of speculation, the truth came to light in the worst possible way. Authorities searched the house and found numerous human remains on the property, along with books on occultism and evidence of dark rituals. Guanajuato shuddered to learn what that wealthy man had been capable of doing. When the authorities finally went for him, Tadeo, cornered and facing his acts, made a desperate decision and took his own life with a gunshot before he could be apprehended. With his death, the possibility of a trial, and knowing firsthand what his exact motivations were vanished. Mejia took the details of his crimes to the grave and left innumerable questions unanswered. But above all this, a legend was born, one that says that all this started with his wife's death. In 1890, Constanza was brutally murdered during a robbery. The woman was stabbed in an alley near the mansion, thus tearing Tadeo away from the love of his life overnight. It is said that, inconsolable and mentally broken by this loss, Mejia developed a single obsession: to see his beloved again, even if to achieve it he had to enter the darkest paths of black magic. It is said that Tadeo sought the help of a powerful witch, a woman versed in dark arts who promised him the possibility of contacting his wife's spirit. But as in all these things, there was a catch. For to achieve it, he had to perform a series of rituals that demanded human sacrifices. Desperate, Tadeo agreed to carry out these atrocious acts. The once respected engineer had become an occultist serial killer, capturing victims at random, both young men and women, using them as a bloody offering in rituals that, according to him, would open the door to the afterlife so he could finally be reunited with his beloved Constanza. It is said that Tadeo perpetrated the murders in the basement of his mansion, where his victims met their death amidst prayers and strange symbols, esoteric symbols. The old mansion of Tadeo Mejia, situated in an alleyway of Guanajuato, did not take long to earn its own place in popular folklore. Soon it was baptized as the House of Laments. This is due to the supposed supernatural shrieks and wailing that many people claim to have heard inside, even today. According to the legend, the souls of Tadeo's victims are trapped within its walls, repeating their final moments and agonizing with their cries of pain whenever night falls. Some visitors say they have felt presences and seen furtive shadows, as if the killer himself or his unfortunate sacrificed ones were still roaming the site, perhaps looking for an exit or eternal rest. Currently, the mansion functions as a museum that recreates this story of love, madness, and death. The case of Tadeo Mejia remains an enigma that blends reality with legends. And while some local historians have confirmed parts of this story, the reality of what happened there, as well as the true motivations of this killer, remain an enigma. Hello, if you are enjoying this content, please do not forget to leave your like and subscribe. You can also support us a lot by leaving a comment or recommending our channel to a friend of yours. If you are on a platform like Spotify, do not forget to rate us with 5 stars. Thank you very much. The UFO in University City. At the beginning of the 1950s, while the UNAM campus was being built in the Pedregal de San Angel, workers in the area allegedly made a quite astonishing discovery. It is said that under the volcanic earth coming from the ancient Zidal volcano, they found a series of quite strange metallic objects that did not correspond to any known pre-Hispanic culture. That immediately aroused intrigue and fear, as no one could explain the origin of those peculiar artifacts. After the discovery, the workers notified the Mexican authorities, and shortly after, a group of military personnel arrived at the site to investigate the event. According to the rumors, while inspecting one of the objects, a lieutenant lost his life after being struck by an intense beam of light that came out of that object. The event was so disconcerting and dangerous that the Mexican authorities decided to cover it up immediately. The witnesses were silenced, and the area near the old quarry of the University City was permanently restricted. Since then, that area within the Pedregal Ecological Reserve has been shrouded in mystery. It is not known exactly what was supposedly found in those excavations, but there is even talk of plates with unknown inscriptions that were recovered along with the metallic artifacts. Rumors indicate that all those pieces were transferred for study to military facilities like Campo Marte in the capital, while the public was never informed of anything. The story gained a lot of popularity with the passage of time, becoming a kind of urban legend, and was reinforced by the appearance of photographs attributed to the journalist Ruben Salazar, famous for his reports in the United States photographs, which supposedly showed the site of the find. Some versions also ensure that the U.S. government collaborated directly in the cover-up, since they already had some experience in these types of cases, and that documents related to the find were also lost in a mysterious way. Today, many doubts persist about what really happened under the foundations of University City, and this case remains without an official explanation. In the hallways of the UNAM, people still talk from time to time about those strange objects and even about a supposed UFO buried there. This, of course, continues to fuel one of the most enigmatic legends of Mexico's maximum house of studies, the Castle of Purity. We go back to the 1940s in Mexico City. Rafael Perez and his wife Sonia lived in an old European-style mansion in the north of the capital, near Insurgentes Avenue. From the outside, this residence looked normal, with large flower pots adorning the facade. For this reason, neighbors called this place the House of the Flower Pots. Nobody suspected that behind those doors, something truly sinister was occurring. And it is that around 1941, Rafael made a radical decision, not to allow his wife or his 6 children to leave the house ever again. He began to obsess over the idea of purity. He believed that society was full of vices and evil that could contaminate his family. So, for him, the only way to raise truly pure and incorrupt children was by isolating them from all external influence. Thus began a domestic captivity that would last almost 2 decades. Inside the house, life passed in a claustrophobic cycle. Rafael covered the windows with planks so that neither his wife nor the children could see out to the street. The little ones, whom he had curiously given uncommon names like Indomita, Libre, Soberano, Triunfador, Bien Vivir, and Libre Pensamiento, never went to school, never played with friends, and never even got to feel what it was like to have the sun caressing their skin in the park. They spent their days helping in the improvised workshop where their father manufactured rat poison. Under threats and a firm hand, Perez made them work long hours mixing chemicals and packaging the poison. All this, obviously, in unsanitary conditions. The mother, Sonia, begged on many occasions that he at least let them study or go out for a while during the day, but Rafael flatly refused. According to his twisted logic, he was forging a new lineage of perfect human beings, free from the outside evil, even if to achieve it he applied cruel and improvised discipline behind closed doors. For years, the Perez Noe family lived in the shadows of that house under a nearly cult-like regime imposed by the patriarch. The children grew up with a deformed notion of the world. They only knew the basic teachings that their mother could provide them in secret as best she could. Meanwhile, outside, the neighbors barely saw Rafael go out from time to distribute his product to shops and markets, always alone and always quiet. To those on the outside, the family practically did not exist. Rafael had his wife controlled under threats and with severe domestic violence. He had also schooled the children from infancy to fear going out or to have a dread of strangers. Furthermore, authorities did not tend to interfere in what happened behind the doors of homes, so this confinement was prolonged for a long time, at least until Indomita, the eldest daughter, who was already almost a young adult in 1959, plucked up the courage one day and began to look for help. On several occasions, she managed to write notes for help on pieces of waste paper, the same ones used to wrap the poison, and threw them under the door, hoping that someone outside would eventually find them. The first 2 attempts apparently did not succeed, but as they say, the third time's the charm. On the 25th of July, 1959, a passerby walking in front of the house noticed a paper lying on the sidewalk. Upon picking it up, he found a surprise. A message written with a trembling hand asking for help, saying that in that house there were people against their will, completely locked up. The citizen immediately notified the police, and a few hours later, agents were already breaking the padlock on the front door and bursting inside. What they discovered there left them stunned. Pale, malnourished children dressed in old-fashioned rags, an adult woman, emaciated and nervous, and a man, Rafael, altered and enraged at the intrusion. The entire family was terrified to suddenly face the outside world. They could barely understand what was happening around them with so many uniformed men and curious neighbors crowding. For them, the simple noise of the street and the bright midday light were already overwhelming, as they had spent too much time in the darkness. Rafael Perez Hernandez was arrested immediately, and as he was taken away, he denied everything, accusing his own family of having set a trap for him. He claimed he was a good father, that he only wanted the best for them, and that their confinement was something he did out of love and protection. After this, the news appeared in all the newspapers. Family kidnapped by father rescued after 18 years, the headlines of that week read, causing both indignation and astonishment in Mexican society. And this case soon became a national scandal. Rafael ended up confined in the Lecumberri prison, known as the Black Palace, awaiting trial for charges of illegal deprivation of liberty, mistreatment, and abuse. However, he would never receive a final sentence. And it is that in 1972, before concluding the process, he passed away in prison, putting an end to this murky story without there being any formal punishment. Meanwhile, his wife and children had to learn to live in a world that was completely new to them. It is known that at first, it was difficult for them to even walk down the street without feeling panic, as anything a car, people, the ringing of a telephone, any of those things could truly overwhelm them. Sadly, this reintegration was not easy. Some accounts indicate that over time, they incredibly came to forgive Rafael and even regretted having reported him due to the emotional disorientation they were suffering. The Castle of Purity is what this event was baptized, taking the name of a 1972 film directed by Arturo Ripstein, which was inspired by this case. And by this point, you will have noticed that this case is not really as mysterious as others we have presented here. However, this story seemed fascinating and intriguing to us, as the main mystery lies in the psyche of this father of a family with a strange idea about what it was to be pure. The true reasons for his unusual decision to keep his family captive inside their own house are, the truth is, never resolved and died with him. The old mansion on Insurgentes Norte still exists, and many pass in front of it without knowing the dark history that its walls harbored. And others, knowing what happened, ensure that a heavy vibe emanates from there, as if the anguish accumulated over so many years had come to permeate and completely envelop this place. What happened to Adela Noriega? Adela Noriega was one of the most successful and beloved actresses in Mexican soap operas of the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. She starred in great hits like Quinceañera, Maria Isabel, El Privilegio de Amar, and Amor Real, becoming a familiar face in millions of homes. The actress seemed destined to continue reigning over Mexican television for many more years. However, after finishing the filming of the soap opera Fuego en la Sangre in 2008, Adela Noriega did something that no one expected. She moved completely away from public life, turning her motivations and her whereabouts into a mystery. Since 2008, she has not appeared on television again, has not given interviews, nor maintains a presence on social media. While many public figures have decided to retire to live quieter lives, far from the stages and the spotlights, no one has been as hermetic and as enigmatic as her. This prolonged absence of a star of her caliber immediately generated all kinds of speculation and rumors that over time have become almost urban legends. The theories are quite varied and in some cases truly surprising. One of the most talked about and controversial versions points to the political sphere, and it is that for many years it has been rumored that Adela Noriega could have held a secret romantic relationship with the then president of Mexico, Carlos Salinas de Gortari, at the beginning of the 90s. According to this theory, that clandestine romance could have even resulted in a son, which is why the presidential family would have decided to hide her from the public eye to avoid a scandal. It is said that Adela received financial support to lead a comfortable life away from the spotlights. This rumor, of course, has never been confirmed but became part of the folklore of Mexican show business. However, both the actress through third parties and those close to the former president have repeatedly denied this story. Other, less conspiratorial theories suggest that Adela simply decided to retire of her own free will. Those who knew her mention that she was always jealous of her private life and that perhaps she got tired of the press harassment and the intensity of the artistic medium. It has been speculated that she could have moved to the United States, possibly to Miami or someplace in Florida, and that she would have dedicated herself to the real estate business. The scarcity of concrete information has also caused more extreme rumors to arise. On occasions, the false news circulated that she had passed away, which was always quickly denied. There was also talk that she could have been afflicted by some serious illness, or that she had approached some religion, or perhaps even a sect that led her to move away from the world. Of course, none of this has been able to be proven, and every time her name becomes a trend again, the unknown about her whereabouts reappears. Televisa tried on one occasion to convince her to participate in special projects like a tribute to the soap opera Quinceañera in 2022, but she kindly declined any intervention. Not even out of nostalgia does it seem she has wanted to return to the cameras, which shows the determination with which she has maintained her decision to remain anonymous. Her family and close friends have respected this silence. Just occasionally, her sister has commented to the press that Adela is very well and that she is happy. All this, of course, without going into details. The story of Adela Noriega is a mystery without crime or supernatural elements, but one that awakens a lot of curiosity because it breaks the mold of fame. An actress who, at the peak of her career with legions of fans, decides to vanish voluntarily from the public eye. Without a doubt, it is something that does not happen every day. Perhaps we will never know for sure the true and deep reasons for her distancing, but whatever the truth, her name is added to the list of the great enigmas of Mexican show business. A mystery that, as long as there are no confirmations, will continue to generate theories and keep alive the hope that perhaps one day the actress will reappear before the cameras to tell the true story in her own words. The Mothman of Chihuahua. The story of the Mothman of Point Pleasant in the United States is extremely well known, but few know that in Mexico we have our own version of this legend. This occurred in March 2009, the vicinity of a small town called La Junta in the state of Chihuahua. That night, a 2-3-year-old young man named Humberto was returning home, driving along a lonely road. What he was going to experience in the next few minutes would change his life completely and would give rise to a simply chilling account. Humberto was driving, focused on the road, barely illuminated by his car's headlights, when suddenly he distinguished something unusual that was on the side of the road. At first, it seemed to him that it was the silhouette of a tall, thin person, perhaps someone walking dangerously close to the pavement. So upon seeing him, he slowed down out of caution. But when he approached a little more, his blood went completely cold. And it is that figure was definitely not human. It was tall, yes, but of a dark, almost uniform tone, with what seemed to be long limbs and a kind of cloak or wings folded over its back. Humberto noticed 2 bright red points that suddenly stared at him. These were the creature's eyes reflecting the light of the headlights. At that instant, he felt a primitive terror, and before he could react, the being emitted a shrill, high-pitched scream and unfolded huge black wings that had been folded. With a pair of strident flaps, the creature rose from the ground and lunged toward the vehicle. Panicked, Humberto slammed on the gas. The car roared forward, but the Mothman did not stay behind. It flew alongside him and even at one moment hit the roof of the vehicle with one of its wings. The young man described later that it was as if that being were playing with him, chasing him as he drove at full speed. For several kilometers, Humberto felt that the winged presence was out there, stalking him, until finally, when he spotted the lights of the next town, this creature veered off and disappeared into the darkness of the sky. When he arrived at a safe place, Humberto stopped the car. He was shaking, trying to process what had just happened. His nerves were in shreds, but the light dents on the roof of the car seemed to confirm that something physical had touched it. In the following days, Humberto shared his experience with friends and family, and even gave a warning to the local authorities. At first, many were skeptical, as it is not easy to believe that a flying Mothman was around there. However, as the story spread by word of mouth, other people in the region raised their hands, claiming that at some point they had seen something similar during the recent nights. Some drivers mentioned that while they were driving along roads near wooded areas or the La Junta cemetery, they had seen a dark being that seemed to have wings and was prowling among the trees or was perched on poles, which then suddenly disappeared. Those testimonies coincided in the description. It was a humanoid entity of more than 2 meters, with huge bat or moth wings and bright red eyes that inspired an atavistic fear just by crossing its gaze. But perhaps the most disturbing thing about this story came shortly after, and that is that just a few weeks later, Mexico experienced a health crisis. The AH1N1 flu epidemic, also known as swine flu, which broke out between March and April 2009. While the initial epicenter was Mexico City, the outbreak quickly became a national emergency and also affected towns in Chihuahua. There were sick people and, unfortunately, also deaths from this new strain of influenza. The connection the locals made was almost immediate. They remembered that according to the classic American Mothman story, this creature tends to appear before great tragedies or disasters, as if it were a cursed messenger. In Point Pleasant, they say that the Mothman foreshadowed the collapse of a bridge in 1967, and in Chihuahua, Many came to the conclusion that that winged figure sighted in La Junta was an announcement of the calamity that was approaching with the flu pandemic. This topic was discussed at length in local newspapers and internet forums. There were those who claimed that the creature had also been seen in other states and even years later, theorizing that it could be some species not yet known. Others linked everything to UFO appearances in the northern region of the country, since, curiously, in some sightings of mysterious lights, it had also been mentioned that some people had seen humanoid figures, which were also winged. Skeptics, for their part, offered more mundane explanations. Perhaps Humberto really saw a very large owl or some bird of prey of large wingspan. And it is that in Chihuahua there are great horned owls and other species with red reflective eyes, and the fright and the imagination could simply have done the rest. Perhaps the other people only suffered from the contagion effect of collective suggestion, seeing the Mothman where there were only shadows and branches moving. Regarding the coincidence with the epidemic, it could be little more than that. A tragic coincidence that the human mind connects in search of meaning. Be that as it may, and depending on what you want to believe, the truth is that the Mothman added itself to the catalog of legendary creatures of our country. For some, it is simply a modern urban myth, but for others, it is a real and terrifying entity that prowls during the night announcing misfortunes. After 2009, there were new sporadic reports in different parts of the country, and even in more recent years, a rumor placed it in Veracruz in the year 2024, linked to another unfortunate event. The mystery of the Mothman of Chihuahua is an enigma that continues to give people something to talk about to this day, so many years after its appearance. And it closes our list of mysteries today with a flourish. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your like, and following us on social media. I hope you have enjoyed these mysteries. Really, thank you very much. We send you a big hug, and with great pride, we can say that now we are 3 million inhabitants of this mundo creepy. Without further ado, I say goodbye. See you later.